Hi, my name is Kayla McNair, and today I'll be talking about how literature and history coincide. Throughout history, various eras have brought about a multitude of conflicts and revolutions, and while some chose to fight these battles with violence and anger, others resorted to using their words. In the end of the day, sometimes words have a stronger impact than actions. The first movement I'd like to look at is the abolitionist movement. While slavery plagued society, many used their own life experiences put into pages in order to express the social injustices done on the African American people. The first piece of literature I'd like to look at is Uncle Tom's Cabin, written by Harriet Beecher Stowe in 1852. It was the first major U.S. novel with a black main character, and Stowe's vivid characters and her sympathetic portrayal of them caused the eyes of the public to be opened to the hardships and the realities of slavery at the time. Through her novel, she was able to build empathy for the enslaved population and help spark the abolitionist movement. The second piece of literature I'd like to look at in this movement is the narrative of Frederick Douglass, an American slave. It was written by Frederick Douglass in 1845, and Frederick Douglass' most important legacy was the use of his words to fight for the freedom and the rights of American slaves. By using his own life experiences, he was able to portray the hardships and the realities of slavery, and his words ended up leading to the Emancipation Proclamation brought about Abraham Lincoln and provided freedom across the nation. The second movement I'd like to look at is the women's rights movement. Early on in history, women were not seen as equals, and as times progressed, women wanted to speak out about these transgressions using works of literature. The first work of literature we'll be looking at is The Vindication of the Rights of Women, written by Mary Wollstonecraft in 1792. Wollstonecraft argued that the current educational system deliberately trained women to be frivolous and incapable, and that a new education system would make women better mothers, wives, and also workers. When it was first published, it was very controversial, but didn't bring immediate results. And it wasn't until 1840s that her principles were actually used in the women's rights movement. Her works and teachings influenced pioneers like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and also Margaret Fuller, and helped spark the women's rights movement. The feminist mystique was also a very popular piece of literature, and it was written by Betty Friedan in 1963. Her book broke new grounds in the concept of women trying to fulfill their life in roles that were not traditional to women at the time. She also heavily supported an increase in women's political roles and is seen as a pioneer for women's rights. The third movement I'd like to discuss is the progressive movement. Industrialism, urbanization, immigration, and political corruption caused a multitude of underlying issues to arise in society. In order to try and help change their circumstances, various writers documented what was occurring to help the less fortunate. The first one we'll be looking at is How the Other Half Lives by Jacob Ritz, and it was written in 1879. This book was full of unapologetically harsh accounts of life in the worst slums of New York City. His words shocked many of the New Yorkers, and his startling tenant statistics and photographs were revealed to society and the realities and the hardships of the less fortunate and of their community. It inspired Roosevelt to close the worst lodging houses and also spurred city officials to reform and enforce the city's housing policies. Also, The Shame of the Cities was written by Lincoln Steffens in 1904. In this book, he focused on government corruption in big cities like Chicago, Minneapolis, St. Louis, and Pittsburgh. Steffens wrote this book by combining many magazine articles to expose the corruption often caused by big businessmen. By compiling very strong opinions against big businesses, Steffens helped the common men rally together in support of the injustices of the major cities. The fourth and final movement I'd like to discuss is the food and health safety movement. With the progressive era underway, there was many issues that were rising from the growing population and industries. The meatpacking industry was running rampant, and American people were unaware of the hazardous and repulsive foods that they were ingesting. In the efforts to make a difference, various publishings were sought at the end to end these injustices. One of the very popular books written was The Jungle by Upton Sinclair, and it was written in 1905. His goal was to expose the appalling work conditions of the meatpacking industry, and his description of diseased, rotten, contaminated meat being packaged and sold to the population of America riveted the nation. After the publication of the book, there was a dramatic decline in meatpacking purchases, and eventually Roosevelt invited Sinclair to the White House to discuss the issue. The shocking insight to this book brought about a new federal food and safety laws, And also, a book that was very popular at the time that helped with the food and safety laws was The History of the Crimes Against the Food Law, written by Harvey Washington Wiley in 1929. Wiley was a chemist that was made popular by his experimentation that was dubbed the Poison Squad. Since many of the food industries were using harmful chemicals as preservatives, Wiley wanted to evaluate the cost of ingesting these chemicals. He experimented by feeding 12 healthy young men borax in their meals every day and recording what was the effects of them. This caused many of them to become very ill, and he revealed the effects of these dangerous compounds by publishing his book to inform the public, and his discoveries played a large role in the food and safety regulations of the time. Over time, many people have been inspired by society and hardships around them to write amazing literary works that have changed the course of history. Many saw issues and used their own words to make a difference in their lives and the people around them. No matter the size of their impact, they still put their truths out into the world and expressed the change that they wanted to see. Thank y'all so much for joining me and listening, and I hope y'all have a great day.